Well, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy earlier today denied any involvement in the crash.
When Ukraine was reaching out to other countries regarding the planes, this is not what we had in mind. I'll tell you honestly, we had something completely different in mind. We wanted support, although perhaps this may also help in some way. We don't have any connection to this situation, that's for sure. I think everyone understands who is involved.
To Kyiv in Ukraine, where we can speak to our correspondent there, Rob McBride. Just before we spoke to Kristen, Rob, we heard from Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He was denying any responsibility for Ukraine's role, or saying there was no role of Ukraine in the death of Prigozhin.
Yeah, absolutely. This latest statement from Vladimir Putin is being regarded with extreme cynicism here in Ukraine. We've had 24 hours of silence from the Kremlin about somebody who is not an inconsequential character on the Russian scene. If anything, this is a creation of the Russian system. You've had Russian state-run media lionizing the apparent victories of Wagner on the battlefields of Ukraine, especially on the Eastern Front. Suddenly, his apparent demise is being talked about by all of the world's media. We've heard from Sergei Lavrov that this is just the machinations of Western media, if you like, and there's nothing really to discuss. But the absolute relative silence within Russia itself, silence from the Kremlin, and then suddenly, just in this almost understated way, a meeting between Vladimir Putin and the senior official saying, "Oh yes, about the aviation incident, isn't it sad?" About this patriot, him and other Wagner leaders who are doing their patriotic duty, talking about him, but very in an understated way, and almost saying there's nothing else to see here, please move on. There is an official investigation and an official inquiry and report will come out in due course. We've heard from Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the Ukrainian president, in a press briefing earlier today to mark Independence Day. It's a public holiday here in Ukraine, saying that as far as he is concerned, Ukraine has had nothing at all to do with this, saying that everybody knows who was involved. The view here from Kyiv is that this has the fingerprints of the Kremlin, of the Russian leadership, all over the demise of Yevgeny Prigozhin.
And Rob, just bring us up to speed with what the role now of Wagner in Ukraine is.
Well, it's very interesting. Officially, there is no Wagner here in Ukraine or any of the Russian-controlled parts of Ukraine. It has ceased to exist as an organization. We know that in this spat with the Russian military, with the establishment and the Ministry of Defense, there was this effort to get Wagner soldiers to sign contracts with the Russian Defense Ministry. It's unclear exactly how many Wagner fighters have done that, have gone over and signed contracts, because of course many of these Wagner fighters are former Russian soldiers who have left the Russian military for whatever reasons, many of them wanting nothing more to do with the Russian military establishment, preferring the more swashbuckling life of a private mercenary that's far better paid, and so on. So it's unclear exactly how many of these Wagner fighters have gone back to the Russian Ministry of Defense, how many of them now may have signed for regular Russian units and be fighting on Russian soil. But as officially, at least, the Wagner structure does not exist here. It does exist north of here in Belarus, and clearly there are concerns just about what this might mean, whether this leads to another period of insecurity. Do Wagner fighters maybe take on some sort of maverick role along the northern border between Ukraine and Belarus? Do they take their fight back to the Kremlin, which would cause instability within Russia internally, which may take some pressure off the lines here, which might be welcomed by the Ukrainian military if you have a resurgence of this mutiny type activity by these rogue Wagner units, as we saw a couple of months ago. So it does remain unclear. We've been talking to people out in the streets. This is a public holiday here. It's Independence Day. It is a hot topic of conversation, given Prigozhin's his notoriety. Lots of people have been talking about this. Is it a top story in the media here about just what happened to him and about his demise? A lot of people we'd spoken to said, well, it doesn't really matter. We're still at war with Russia, whether those are Russian Wagner fighters or Russian regular military units. That is still our existential struggle, a fight that we are involved in. That will continue. A lot of other people seeming to indicate, quite cynically perhaps, that there was an inevitability about this, that Prigozhin, in his very public fight with the Russian Defense Ministry that he embarked on several months ago, basically set the clock ticking, ultimately leading now to his ultimate demise.
OK, Rob McBride talking to us there from Kyiv. Thanks very much, Rob.